Welcome everyone to our episode 130. I am here with an honored guest, Natasha Sharma. Thank you, Natasha, for being here. It's
Thank
a
you for having
pleasure
me.
to have you. And today we're going to speak about a topic that it's in everyone's mind, although some people are afraid of that. But it is now a topic that we can switch and we can speak about the wisdom of the end game. That's the title of our episode, and we are going to discover many, many messages, lessons, and the meaning of what is this expiration date that we are always faced with. And we can't escape about that. So I'm going to introduce Natasha. She's NS Shakti, Natasha Sharma, is a clinical hypnotherapist, best-selling author, speaker, mentor, and hypnobirthing instructor, Deep HB, from KGH UK, and she's based out of Mumbai, India. Her passion is money mindset, manifestation, and its relation to self-worth. Her mission is to have the conversations about death, thereby normalizing them. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
So, my first question is, how did you arrive to combine and to merge all of these, let's say, career choices and endeavors that you have been doing, such as being a hypnotherapist and then also a mentor, a speaker, and in hypnobirthing instructors? How is your story?
That's really well put as a question. So life has given me many opportunities, obviously, different experiences, and my qualifications, as you said, interestingly, come all the way from birth to death. I have had a one-on-one very early experience with death compared to most people. I was very, very, very close to my grandfather, and he died when I was 14. And immediately after he died, my mother fell sick, and then my mother died 2 years later. So at 16, I lost my mother, and I saw her suffer and die. And it took me 35 years to even come out from the anger stage of grief around her death because I was so young. And, that's the age at which daughters and mothers anyway clash. And so, it was, a lot of regrets, a lot of like untold stories and unlived experiences. And as a girl, especially growing up without a mother, I found especially hard. Like I didn't know which size clothes to wear. I used to go shopping and I used to think that I was bigger than I was. I didn't realize that you had to buy the right size, that bigger clothes would make you look bigger. Anyway, small things like that. So finally, when I started studying hypnotherapy, and I did my healing, and then I finally healed from her death, I realized that this would be a good conversation because I have a point of view to share. I have a lot of personal experiences, and especially during the pandemic when people started dying of all ages around us. So normally there is I mean, my mother died young, but aside from that, normally you grow old, you fall sick, and then you die. But in pandemic, people were dying of all ages, left, right, and center. And I just saw that there was this space for me to share my experiences, and maybe some people would resonate with me. And that's how I started on this adventure.
Mm, nice. It's a combination that you didn't expect, of course, and that was the lessons, let's say, that life sent you. And so my follow-up questions that is from this curiosity mindset is,
Mhm.
what do you think is was the biggest lesson that the death of your grandfather and your mother left you with once you passed through that anger grief state?
So the biggest lesson actually came to me. So my grandmother, she died just before the pandemic, and like a year before the pandemic. And a week before she died, she and I were having in England, and she and I were having this conversation, and she told me to start writing. And I was like, what? And then she's like, you don't understand that you have a very interesting life and you have a lot of. She was telling me that my life doesn't look interesting to me because it's my life, but if I spoke about it with other people, wrote about it, then it would resonate with people. She was telling me about a book that she'd read, a normal Indian woman in a village, simple book, simple life, but my grandmother said she loved reading it. So she told me this a week before she died. And so after that, I started thinking that I did need to write. And so that was just going around in my mind. And then the pandemic hit. And then all this death came right in front of me. And I had done my healing and from my grief. And I saw how many people around me were dying without being prepared for death. And for myself, I actually did this, David. I stood in front of the mirror one day. I looked at myself in the eyes because, any one of us could have died during the pandemic, right? So I looked in the mirror and I asked myself how I would feel if I died the next day. And I cried. I literally grieved my own death. And then I came out the other side. I sat down and said, okay, fine. If I started giving my possessions away in my mind and I started writing them. And that shifted my perspective for life so dramatically. That's when I made it my mission to start talking about death.
Nice.
So the lesson that I learned is acceptance.
Yeah. Yes, I think that, well, when you have such a close encounter with death and so frequent as you suffered first in your teenage years and then as an adult, and then of course I think that, as you mentioned, every one of us, when we were in that stage of the pandemic and the most difficult times, we really have death in our minds much more than in any other season of our lives, because I think we never faced so much struggle about what was happening, and probably many people uh, couldn't understand why this was happening, etc. So these encounters make you think: is it really gonna be me next?
Mm-hmm.
When am I going to go? And as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
being faced with that idea and that, let's say, reflection, makes you think about your own life and what
Mm-hmm.
have you done, and analyze the things that you really wanted to do and you haven't done them, and other things that, as you mentioned, material things that you have to assign or fix so that people don't struggle. Because yes, I also know that when people die, if you don't have your assets and your administrative things and even online things, as we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about before, you struggle, no?
Yep.
Because you, technology is not reliable, and less in those moments that you are stressed and you have so much pain. So you don't have the patience to fix those things. So you need to have everything according to a, let's say, a checklist, no? Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that we sometimes step away from these conversations because, of course, we wouldn't want to think that it is gonna be us one day
Mm-hmm.
that we are going to go. But as we mentioned at the beginning, and it was kind of funny if we can make it like that, because we all have that experience. As you mentioned, we are from birth, we have a sequence, but that sequence is not, we don't know that date. No,
Yes,
it
it's
can
not
be,
guaranteed.
yeah, it's not guaranteed. It can be at 10 years old, it can be at 11, it can be at whatever age it is.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, you would live your life thinking that if it is tomorrow, I'm okay,
Mm-hmm.
because I have not no regrets, no.
Yes.
And that word leads me to ask you also, how did you handle the, or what were the regrets that you thought about when you were faced with your first with your mother, then with your grandfather, and mostly when your grandmother asked you to write.
So with my grandmother, so my mother and my grandfather was so early and I was just so young. I spent most of my youth um just being angry because I regretted a life without them. But my grandmother was my mother's mother. So the grandfather I'm talking about that I mentioned is my was my father's father. And my mother's mother outlived my mother. My grandmother's only been gone 5 years. So I mean, in April, next April, it'll be 6 years. But so she has been there. So I used to think to myself that, I lost my mother, but I have my mother's mother. So, I shouldn't be so sad. And she was an active part of my life and we were very, very close. The only regret I have when she died is we used to talk about everything. And we've spoken about death. I've spoken to her. She died when she was 88. And, her walking was difficult for her, getting around was difficult. But I used to ask her that, what makes you go on? And she's like, every morning I wake up, I say thanks to the Lord for another day. And I was like, oh, wow, that's just wonderful. And so no matter how much she suffered, she was just glad to be alive. Um, and the only thing I regret is after all our open conversations, somehow because death wasn't a dinner table conversation amongst the whole family, no one actually knows, including myself, what she wanted to be done with her ashes. So that's like a huge regret. And that's why that is part of why this is my mission. That the more you talk about it, these details then don't get missed out. You know, because when you are grieving, then the first thing you do is deny. You are in denial. You're in shock. The whole family I'm talking about, and then there's the anger, and people will then use any excuse to try to express their anger, and so there's unnecessary fights, at weddings and at funerals, and that's just one of the things you do because change is big, and you know so that's my regret about my grandmother. And interestingly, my father died um, during the pandemic, but not of COVID. But he and I, in the last year of his life, he wasn't sick, he wasn't suffering, he wasn't supposed to die. Um, he and I don't know, both of us, we decided individually to leave the past in the past and to just start a new relationship. He came to visit me in Bombay in February, which was his 75th birthday. And we ended up celebrating it together. He went back home, and then we used to get on conversations for the whole year, and we spoke about normal things. I decided to release everything of the past, whatever angst we had, whatever disagreements we had, because I realized that neither of us could go back to the past and change it. So I'm like, what is the point of staying angry? What is the point of having these complaints against my father if he can't change anything? So that led to a really good relationship in the last year. And so when he died, one of the main things was that I had no regrets. And that's when I realized that if I start these conversations, not only can we talk about the practical things or the philosophical things, but if we do actually accept our own death and we live every day with our loved ones to the fullest potential of the day, and we think about dying without regrets, and think about losing them and having no regrets, that is the best way to live
Mm.
life. At least for me, that's what I found. So if you were to even ask me today that if I think about dying tomorrow or tonight, do I have any regrets? I don't.
Mm.
I think I've told all my loved people, I think all the people I love know that I love them. They feel loved. And my affairs are all in order. My passwords are all in a notebook. My husband knows about it. So sorted.
Yeah, I can imagine that doing that huge exercise of uh, thinking about those moments make you really, well, first get your mind ready to fix everything that needs to be fixed and to leave those things as you mentioned about your father. And it's funny, but I also did something with my father that I really uh, think I can share here because it is related to um, undoing these knots and uh, how do you say this? These let's say blocks that you have from your ancestors. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always having a difficult relationship with my father because I didn't think that he did or his best when we were children, and I had to take the role of the father. I was
Mm.
really small. I had 6 years old, and I felt that responsibility to be with my brother and to care about him, and also listen to my mother complain about the struggles that he she had with him and all those things of relationships. But I wasn't ready for that, and I
Mm.
had to be ready. And I think I skipped childhood and I went all the way to adulthood, or I had to mature really quickly
Mm.
and to think as a different person, as a person that had to figure out what was happening and what was my role in trying to fix things. So all those things, I think, fill me with also anger and frustration about those things. And just some years ago, I started to dive deep into this ancestral lineage, and I started to understand that probably the wound of my father was from his own father
Mm-hmm.
all the way back to his grandfather. So I did a course about healing the father's wound, and I tried to also write as much as I can about the things. And as much as I can, I have to let go of that anger and just try to understand as much as possible. Fortunately, my father is alive, and I could ask him still about his story. And that's what I did this last birthday that he had just 1 month ago. We had that conversation, and he didn't expect that, of course, because it was his birthday, but I'm sorry, I had so much curiosity and we had to fix that. So I started
Nice.
asking him about
Nice.
about his father and about his grandfather, and then I understood everything. For me, it was really easy to understand that he also had the same life that I had. He repeated the pattern, and he also had to be in charge of his mother and brothers, and he his grandfather shut down his sons because he married with a person that was Christian or Catholic, sorry, and he was Jewish. So he said,
Oh.
"Go because you are breaking this religious, whatever it is called, law, or I don't know how to call it,
Mm-hmm.
but." And that's the story that passed on. So it was a lot of pain, and it was a lot of responsibilities, also frustration that have they had to face, and all the way to my generation. So when I was speaking with him, I said that I don't want this pain and these struggles to pass on to my daughter. So I needed to fix this. When
Perfect.
yes, when I fixed that, I felt that sensation that you mentioned, that you take away so much weight,
Yes.
and you have that sensation of understanding that life in the most unthinkable moments can be understood, and you
Mm-hmm.
can be at peace, at least with you. And of course,
Yes.
you cannot force anyone to do anything.
Yes.
But but my father thanked me for doing that, in spite of also crying. Both of us cried, and I think that healed us also.
Mm.
So it's so emotional that it's really really good that you are also uh, sharing those things with everyone, because we really need to think about our ancestors and the story that they gave us,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, because understanding that is gonna make our life easier, no?
Yes. And exactly what you said about your daughter. It is each one of our responsibilities in whatever our ancestral story is, the trauma and the gifts, that we embrace it now and we realize that we are transforming it for the future generations. And just because the stories come down, and that even includes disease, the stuff that we have in our so-called inherited diseases, it's up to us to say enough, it stops here.
Mm. Yeah.
And that happens with the healing, that happens with the work that you're talking about, it happens with the forgiveness and the letting go. And like you said, when you actually start the work, your body relaxes and you
Yeah.
suddenly feel so light, and you wonder, why do we as human beings carry so much angst, and why do we need so much drama? We're not meant to be all caught up in things. We're just supposed to be born for joy. It's a short life. Even though today we can live to be 100, that's still short. It's over before you know it. And we may as well just live every day to the fullest with
Yeah.
joy and gratitude. Everything else is just unnecessary. And you being on the self-awareness path, being going towards being a self-actualized person, and so am I, and all the people I work with. Um, it is about understanding that we have the power to just change our lives with just a thought. It is that simple. A lot of people will not believe us when we say this, but you and I know it's true.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and I also spoke about this on one of the episodes that I did by myself, and I said, do this work because we really need healed society. And I think that all the conflicts, all the things that we see in in the collective mindset of many people, and the chaos we see, is just that. It's just a continuation of everyone else's pain, that we many times get into the drama, as you
Mm,
mentioned, and we get addicted to that, because it's
mhm,
easy also to get addicted, and that's also one of the lessons of learning about these patterns and learning about what your parents and grandparents did. You see those patterns so clearly, and you say, well, that's why I picked this person, and that's why I suffer like that. And I think that your soul at the end heals, and
mhm.
probably in a next lifetime you will be in another kind of classroom, let's say, no.
I like
Because
that.
I think that we are in a classroom and we are here to learn every day those lessons in an easy way or in a hard way. Depends on us,
Hmm.
no? Because we can also make it more difficult if we don't do anything, no?
Absolutely. That is
How,
so true.
how do you deal with that? How do you deal with these conversations when people close off? And of course, that you cannot talk about something if the other person doesn't want to, but what have you done to try to mm, make them have another perspective on the things?
Are you asking about the death conversation or about healing?
Both, both.
So the death conversation, it's interesting you should ask that question because the first book collaboration that I was in, I wrote about death, and then I started speaking about it, and then I realized that there were certain people in my family
Hmm.
who were at a certain age where but their finances weren't in order. So they were anyway vulnerable, or perceivably vulnerable. And I tried to start the conversation. And then I had other members of my family saying, "Don't do this. It's stressing them out. It's distressing. Don't do it." And I still did it because it was so important to me. And when I'm having conversations like I'm with you, and they're so effective and they're so appreciated, it didn't occur to me that my family wouldn't appreciate it. And I spent, I think, a year after my aunt trying to have the conversation. She refused. And then I ended up writing an email to her and then CCing other members of the family and saying, "Listen, this is what it is. If this is what you need to do. And if you, because I have the responsibility for her.
Hmm.
And if they won't listen to me, then I'm out." So I took that stand. But during that time, I stopped coming on podcasts. I stopped going on stages. I just felt in my head that if my house isn't in order, how can I go and advise other people? So for so in that last year, I've written books on other subjects, like chapters in books on other subjects. I've done the whole money manifestation, mindset mastery book. I did fiction, children's fiction, two books for children, and then I had a 2 week trip to Egypt, which was epic. And there was a book that came out of the Egypt trip. It launched this year in January called Love Initiation. Now you can imagine when I was called to Egypt, I got that opportunity. I was like, nobody does death better than the Egyptians. And so I went there and it was amazing. I had such up leveling, such a vibrational shift. It was just absolutely magical. But when I came back, I still didn't start talking about death because this whole drama was still going on in my family. And then one day I decided that not everybody is going to be receptive to our messages. And I'm doing the people who are ready to have these conversations a disservice because it's not always that we're successful everywhere. So I've had to accept the fact that I can't change this in my family and I'm not responsible for it either. And then I've come back out and I'm having these conversations with you. And as far as healing is concerned, I don't know if you know about human design, but in human design, so I'm a projector. So anyway, the biggest lesson that I've had to learn is had to wait for the invitation. So conversations about healing, transformation, the work that I do, money mindset, self-worth, hypnotherapy, I just don't discuss it with people unless they ask me a question or they invite my opinion. Then I share. Otherwise, I just don't. So I'm not here to change people's minds. I'm here to help elevate people who are seeking
Mm.
elevation and revelation and
Yeah.
clarity.
I share that thought, although I'm not a projector, I'm a generator manifestator or MG.
Yeah,
Uh,
manifesting generator. Yeah.
yes. And I feel that at some level I am more in that sense a projector because I was different in the past. I also had to push more and to sometimes control or force things as that
Mm-hmm.
energy that I have. But nowadays I see that it's just better to wait for people, as you mentioned, so that they open up. And that's also what I did in that case with my father. Having that conversation didn't guarantee that he was going to take it well and he was going to answer
Mm-hmm.
the questions and he was going to do anything. I just tried it because it was my last resource as
Right.
to understand the story and to more or less try to fix mine. And what he did was perfect, but I was just flipping the coin. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, as you mentioned, when people are ready to be healed, they look for that person or that strategy or that book or whatever they have to do first, and they ask questions. That's the most important thing that they start doing, no? Asking questions and being curious with either what you are doing or
Mm-hmm.
how can you recommend something for them, no? And that's the gateway to do some more, no?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how is hypnotherapy helped you in this sense of the healing journey of a person? What is the process of, or well, I know that you arrived to certain part of the unconsciousness, but
Mm-hmm.
how can you describe, let's say, one case that you have had and what is happening with them when you get to that level of the hypnotherapy?
So I used to do straight on hypnotherapy for specific issues, a physical disease, or some fear or um, phobias, or I used to take specific cases and I have had a lot of success. I can give you an example. Like there was this one woman, one of my early cases, she was training to run in marathons, and suddenly one day her knee gave out, and she had to, the doctor said that they couldn't fix it and that they were giving her some sort of experimental surgery, like making some sort of mesh that was go holding her kneecap in place and stuff. And she came to me at that point in time. And by doing the regression, we figured out that because she was not a young person, but she was in an office, and the office had basically nominated her to run the marathon on their behalf. And she was like putting together a team, and so it was a corporate exercise. And the coach that they'd hired, he was basically being inappropriate with her, and she was feeling um not good about it. She was married and everything, and she didn't want the attention. And so psychologically, she created this situation so that she couldn't run anymore. And then in when she got that revelation in our work together, she's running now.
Mm,
So that is how miraculous and effective working with the subconscious mind really is, because the conscious mind is only 10% of the mind's bandwidth. 90% is in the subconscious, and we don't even know what's in there from childhood onwards, where the patterns are, where the beliefs are, where the values are, and our new experiences, how those, and the body is how we express ourselves. The mind expresses itself through the body. Um, and but then I realized that in terms of our self-awareness journeys, when we want to use a tool like hypnotherapy, then just keeping it as a tool is the best. So that's why I work with self-worth, because self-worth is that thread that if you pull at, the whole sweater will unravel, because everything we do in life, how we show up, how we have conversations, how we learn to let go of anger, how we're in acceptance and surrender, is when we have high levels of self-worth. When we are doubting ourselves, that's when there's violence, that's when there's chaos. When we are at peace, then everything is just peaceful. And that depends on how much we value ourselves and how much we love ourselves, versus looking for validation from outside, so, or stimulation from outside. So self-worth. And because on this planet, in the third dimension, money is the energy with which we function, that your self-worth directly impacts your money story. If you are not able to up level your money story, it's because your self-worth is equaling your bank account. So only by increasing your levels of self-worth are you going to be able to access infinite abundance.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense also to because with many people that struggle financially, what you can see is that they have those uh, ideas that they don't deserve certain things,
Mm-hmm.
so they sabotage
Exactly.
their story, and that, for example, happened with my father also, that he
Mm,
sabotaged himself because of that unworthiness that he was carrying, and I told him that's why you couldn't have a good job, because
mm-hmm.
not because you were not capable, because I never doubt about his abilities and his capacity, but he had so much pain inside and he has never spoken about it or cried about it, although he said he did, but I didn't think so.
Mm-hmm.
So I that's what I saw in him, and I that's what I see in some people just that I know. So, and as you mentioned, it is that, and some people, it's funny because some people, even if they have the money, they don't give the life that they deserve, and they still feel guilty about
Mm-hmm.
having certain things that probably for others can be a luxury, but it is not about that. It is about the worthiness, and it is about
Exactly.
saying, I deserve this house finally because now I have done this and that, and
Yeah.
I have the means. So,
Absolutely. It's all relative. So somebody who we might perceive as very rich, they still have to deserve their life in that big mansion with the five sports cars, right? For them, so it's all relative whether they have a
yeah.
castle and a mansion and five cars, and I have one car and one flat. It's still how much can you increase. It's like, so what I was saying is that, when I started working with the money mindset and the self-worth story, when we need to go back into time like your father, that's when I use my hypnotherapy. That's when I do past life regression, I do age regression. So the hypnotherapy basically plays into the work that the clients need to do. I just hold space with that tool. So that's how hypnotherapy has become for me now. But that's not saying if somebody came to me with a disease or a fear or an addiction that they needed help with, that I couldn't help them. Of course I can. But I need to, sort of have something that aligns with my growth, and my self-awareness is turned into self-actualization now. The pace is going up, increasing, the vibrational frequencies are increasing. So now my automatic thing is taking people along with me as I raise my vibration, taking people along with me there. So that's where it's at, and convincing people who are still in 3D and in suffering that they can, undo that suffering, is just, I don't know, it doesn't feel in alignment for me anymore. Like,
Mm,
people, it's like I'm a university professor, and there are other teachers for them, and when they're ready, I'm here. It's kind of like that. But it's wonderful. It's absolutely magical. And what you were saying about your father, my father was the same. He was a chartered accountant. He was a finance director in a big multinational company. But every time he tried to set up a business
mm,
on his own, which he did several times, he never succeeded. It's
mm,
because he had blocked himself off from ever thinking that he was a businessman. Because his father wasn't a businessman. His father was, used to work for the British Raj, and he was a clerk. And so you level out where you come from unless you do the work that you and I are doing, and we undo the story and we write a new story, and then And then we break free from that generational thing. Again, it goes back to what we started our conversation with about the generational patterns. And what's really funny is when I've been working with my clients with this money mindset thing. One day, it was about 6 months ago, we were having a group session, and I was telling each person that, how much do you need, how much money do you need to manifest, and what are your desires. We were doing that exercise, and suddenly someone said some amount, and I was like, 1 second, hold on, why can't you increase that amount? And they're like, well, that's good enough, I can do this. And I'm like, but why would you even, when you're visualizing, why would you even stop at $10 million or $100 million? Why? Are you seriously telling me that there's nothing you can think of doing with $1 billion? You
Mm.
can spend it on bettering your world. If nothing else, can't you just buy up tracts of land and let the animals roam free? I mean, really, you're telling me you can't expand your mind to do something productive with that money for yourself and for others? Please. So that's when we started like blowing the lid off the amount of money. It's like it's a healed world is full of infinite potential and infinite possibilities and abundance with ease and flow. And what you said about the world being all chaos, if each one of us just take responsibility for ourselves, like you are, David, and I am, that's all it takes. One person at a time, raising the vibration, increasing divinity in human beings, both masculine and feminine,
Mhm.
getting rid of the toxic. We have a world that's full of ease and joy and peace.
Yeah, yeah, it's so easy to see it when you have done that work. and
Yes.
and I was just also speaking about that. For me, the biggest tool has been discipline, and
Mm.
discipline for me has been the one way tool of doing the things and having the plan and having that vision. And as you mentioned, all of those things that we interact with, that we it is just 10%, and the other 90 is behind.
Yes.
That 90 that is behind, if you have access with some kind of vision mindset, and trying to, as you did the exercise with your client, of taking that lead off of why this quantity, it's okay. And if he could have answered, well, because with that quantity I'm okay, I just want this and that, and that's okay, and I'm gonna be happy, and I'm gonna be fulfilled, well, that's okay. but
Mm-hmm.
but you sense that he was not there yet. And
Exactly.
so the mindset was not the billion. The mindset was, you feel that you deserve whatever it, unlimited things, no?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the worthiness that we carry from many generations, that is in the collective also many times. And
Yes.
we pick on that energy because we resonate with that at certain
Mm-hmm.
point. And when we step away from that vibration, as you mentioned, and we raise the vibration, we start having access to things that we didn't think of.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's beautiful. So I think that with that, we can make it a wrap up exercise for people so that we can.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's gonna be probably a complicated questions, but how can you assemble this uh, wisdom that we are speaking about the end game with the death conversation, with the healing, and with the meaning that we need to um, uh, match in our lives? You know?
So, yes, you're right. It's a complicated question, but everything is connected, right? So, if we start with the self worth again, that if we can heal effectively. And honestly, people can come to you, people can come to me, people can do Reiki, they can do yoga. Like, all these healing practices are all, they're basically all roads that lead to Rome. There are different ways that resonate with different people, but anything that starts making you become self aware, making you start taking responsibility for yourself. So, the minute that we become 100% responsible for ourselves, that is the key. That is for our life, that is for our death, that is for the death of the loved ones, that is for how we live our lives, that is how we interact with our loved ones, that is how we feel about ourselves. I mean, there are so many songs and stories about you can't love anyone else till you love yourself. So that's what it is. But you can't love yourself unless you're 100% responsible for who you are, even the parts that you don't like, or the memories where you might have done something that you regret, or, you have to heal from that. And you have to say, it's okay. It's okay. I forgive myself. I forgive the other person. I let go. And like we said, obviously, David, in an hour, we can't possibly bring all our experience together to tell your audience, but we can sort of initiate this conversation so that they at least start reflecting and then
Mhm.
taking some sort of a movement, some sort of little steps. So, whatever, reach out for whatever healing practices are available to you, and then start moving your energy towards self acceptance, to self forgiveness. Then comes the time when you can start raising your vibration. And and then and one of the most effective ways is considering your death, because what that does is, even though we don't know what time or date or when is going to happen, and that's what's scary, the fact that it's going to happen, if we really, really, really accept that, then the whole perspective changes, because we understand that we don't have forever. Oh, I'll call this person tomorrow. Oh, I'll do this next year. That changes, and that makes today's life infinitely more richer, as long as you move away from the fear. So, moving away from the fear is doing the things that I'm speaking about. What you said, the list, getting your affairs in order, being loving with your loved ones. If you have relationships that are not serving you, then draw your boundaries and back away and spend your time doing things that do make you happy instead of doing the things that make you miserable, right? If it is with a parent that's difficult, then have a conversation like you had a conversation with your father. But make steps. Don't just bury it under the carpet, and then you die, they die. There's all this regret, there's all this angst, there's all this drama and all this chaos. And so, that is how it all ties together. And it, starts and finishes with self acceptance and 100% responsibility for yourself, and accepting what is, and surrendering to the process of life.
No, that was beautiful. It was just so similar to what I spoke about, also discipline and
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. Because
Mm-hmm.
I asked the same question in one of my posts, and who is responsible of your life? That was the question.
Perfect.
I think that many people think that they are not responsible for their lives, and they blame and they have excuses and they have
Mm-hmm.
this and that. And well, that's the first thing. It's just answering that simple question. And as you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, taking your life and saying, well, this is it. Is this what I want? Is this the most I can give? And I think asking that hard question can make the mind open for everyone. I hope.
Mm.
I hope.
Right.
No?
Right. I mean, it's so amazing to have a conversation like this with each other, when we think the same way, and it's just so relieving. And I do believe that there are a lot of people out there who would benefit from even just listening to us speak, because I'm so happy to hear, a fellow warrior speak about adventures. And like I said, when people hear us from the outside, who haven't started the work at all, the things that we're talking about may even sound like unachievable. And that what are they talking about? Like, what do you mean up leveling? What do you mean opening your mind?
Mm.
It only happens when you start walking on the path.
Yeah,
And then you'll find the meaning. There's no magic pill. There's no one book or one thing out there that's gonna just magically solve it. You have to start walking the path, and then the way opens up for you. You don't have to know how, you just have to know that you need to do it.
yeah. You took my words. You don't have to know the how. I was going to say, you don't
Oh,
worry about that. Don't worry about that because it's gonna come. No,
mhm.
we don't need to be experts in everything. And in fact,
Absolutely.
it's much better that we are not experts in everything because
Mhm.
we still have room to learn and to embrace all the wisdom that I didn't know I was going to receive with this conversation. So this is amazing, no? And that's
Yes.
how you start uplifting your vibration
Mhm.
just with these kind of conversations. So I think that this has been an amazing episode. Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. I knew
Thank
that
you
it
so
was
much,
going to
David.
be like that.
I really
And
enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me.
thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. And we hope that you have picked something. And if you think it's difficult, yes, think like that. But think that you can give one step at a time and we are not being pressured by anything. You have the time of your life to do the steps and baby steps. So
Absolutely.
thank you, everyone, and we encourage you to ask more questions if you have with any one of us, and to look for Natasha's link that I didn't ask you, but you can say now that where can people find you?
So the best way, honestly, is to follow me on Instagram. I'm not completely, totally active, but I do post. And whenever there's activities like workshops, myself and three other really brilliant women are doing leading something called the Goddess Revolution. And
Mhm.
we do this every 4 months. And it is about uplifting the divine feminine, making sure that it doesn't become too toxic in the whole endeavor to come equal to men or overtake men, and at the same time working for the collective energy to encourage the divine masculine to rise up. Because what we have right now dominating the world is the toxic masculine. So that's the work that I do out there right now, and it's all over social media. So if they follow me on Instagram at you can put the link in the thing, right?
Yes.
There's NS Shakti dot author, and I have Natasha Sharma underscore body speak. I have two Instagram handles,
Okay. Thank
and
you.
there's the LinkedIn as well. I think LinkedIn might be easiest, right, David? That's the best
Yeah.
way, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can look for her, Natasha Sharma, in LinkedIn,
Yes.
and you can find her. So
Yes.
thank you. And we will listen to each other on our next episode.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.